You're listening to the Wired for Impact podcast.
So anyway, I'm curious how that type of music can actually go about affecting somebody's behavior. Can you walk us through maybe the steps of how that happens?
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that question because it ties in so much of what I've been researching. You know, it ties in, again, the emotional reaction that you have to music. It ties in epigenetics, which I'll talk about in a minute. It ties in mind control programming that happens, and really the spiritual battle that we're in the midst of. So maybe to answer that question, I think what's important to understand is how over time this has been developed, how music has been really orchestrated in such a way that it would be weaponized against us. Again, going back to what I talked about in the beginning, that Nephilim agenda is really to mutate us, to defile our DNA. Well, it seems like a crazy concept that music could do that. So let me walk us through this a little bit.
That'd be great.
Before I do, though, I have to give credit where credit is due, because I have a dear friend. His name is Mitchell Florin, and he is easily the most brilliant person I've ever encountered. He's a biopharmaceutical microbiologist.
Wow.
And he was right. And
Yeah.
he was a whistleblower on Big Pharma. As a result of doing that, he lost his marriage, his health, his career, and his financial portfolio. But
Why did he
stood up.
Why did he lose his marriage, if you don't mind me asking?
They went after her, Big Pharma.
And that stressed out the marriage. Wow.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So he paid a high price for standing in integrity. And the reason I say that is because he is the one that provides me with all sorts of research. He's like a personal professor for me. And he was an atheist for years and years and had this radical encounter with Jesus. I think it was about 14 years ago. And he's been walking with Jesus ever since. And I'm so grateful that the Lord connected us, because we just make a really good team. He does a lot of the research behind the scenes. And when I'm, wanting to discuss a certain topic or write about it or speak about it on a podcast, I'll just send him a text. I'm like, hey, Mitchell, do you have anything on X, Y, and Z? And I get like 10 or 15 peer-reviewed studies on X, Y, and Z that I'm asking for.
Amazing.
So he also wants me to send his regards to you. He was thrilled that I was going to share some of his findings or some of the research that he provides me with. He hasn't done the actual research, but anyways, he sends his regards.
That's very kind. I'd love to have him on the podcast if he's interested, if he wants. So,
well, thank you.
You can connect us if he wants to do
one
that.
of the things that I want to do to walk us through this is first review some patents. And these are patents that are really using mind control technology. Now, there's a ton of patents. I'm only highlighting a handful. And one of the things I want to say too, before I go over these is, the person who came up with this invention may have had the highest integrity. I don't want to assume anything negative or nefarious, but we know that inventions don't always stay in the hands of their inventors, and that they get into the hands of people that don't have the utmost integrity. So going back to 1968, so patent number 3393279 talks about the nervous system excitation device. That's the title of this patent. And what it does is it provides a means of initiating controllable responses of neurosenses without applying pressure waves to the ears or stress waves to the ears. So in other words, it uses electromagnetic signals with a frequency above the audible range. So it's a way of communicating without our ears picking it up. So that was in 1968. In 1976, patent number 3951134. This is titled the apparatus and methods for remotely monitoring and altering brain waves. Now check this out. What this does is it uses high frequency transmitters to radiate electromagnetic energy of different frequencies through antennas, which are then capable of scanning the entire brain of a person. Then the waveforms are sent back to the brain to affect a desired change. And all that is done remotely. In 1992, patent number 5159703, it's called Silent Subliminal Presentation System. And this uses audio signals that are high enough in the audio spectrum that the human ear can't pick up, but low enough that home entertainment systems can use them. And so it sends a signal through home entertainment systems that our brains pick up, but our ears cannot hear.
Amazing.
In 1993, there's a patent number 5213562. And this is the method of inducing mental, emotional, and physical states of consciousness, including specific mental activity in human beings. So what this does is it uses audio stimulation to replicate a desired state of consciousness, which can vary between states of alertness and sleep. And these states of consciousness can be transferred from one individual to the next. That's crazy.
Whoa. That's crazy. Okay. Yeah, this is so like, it's so wild. I'm trying to wrap my head around that piece of it, and or what the actual potential nefarious application of this is. Is it to make you nauseous? Is it to lay in suggestive thought in your head to, be lazy or to go do something stupid? Or is it to literally physically control? Like, what is the tangible outcome of this?
Yeah, here's where my mind goes. A potential use. I can't prove this at all. But let's say in schools, for example, they are releasing this type of frequency that can induce kind of a more sedated state in students to where they are essentially being dumbed down. So their mental activity is not as sharp, is not as able to pick up nuances that are being spoken to them. That's one possible usage of it. One more patent that I'll bring our attention to. This one was in the year 2000. And this I know how it's being used practically. So this is patent number 6017302. And it's called Subliminal Acoustic Manipulation of Nervous Systems. Okay, so within humans, if sensory resonances can be excited using subliminal atmospheric acoustic pulses. So essentially, a resonance of 0.5 hertz can affect the autonomic system and may cause relaxation and drowsiness. A resonance of 2.5 hertz can actually slow down cortical processes and create disorientation. So how this is being used is police will actually use this device in standoff situations. So that kind of gives you an idea. Now, in addition to all these patents that I've mentioned, there are advances in biotechnology that we need to be aware of in order to maintain our sovereignty as individuals. Mm-hmm. Now, most everyone these days understands what Wi-Fi is. I remember when I was in graduate school, my last year, second to the last year in graduate school is when the internet came out, or at least we started seeing advertisements. And I was in California, and I remember the advertisement was surf the web. And I was like, what the heck is a web? Like, what do you mean surf a web? I'm picturing waves at the beach. How do you surf that? I didn't understand what it was. But now everyone knows what Wi-Fi is. But not everyone understands what Bi-Fi is. Bi-Fi is the biological internet, and it transmits information across the DNA into cells. Now, our DNA is like this energy amplifier. It's a coil. And essentially, we were created such that our DNA is like an antenna that picks up frequencies that were set in motion from the creator God. And every cell in our body has this divine intelligence. But what the Nephilim agenda has been doing is it's set out to defile the beauty of our God-designed DNA. Now, I'll share a couple of research studies that are mind-blowing. So the first one is in 2012. This was done by the Stanford Research Institute. And what they discovered is they discovered how to use a virus to encode information into infected cells. So once a virus gets into cells, it then releases that information. Now, again, if we take a step back and we consider what we've been through recently, is it possible then that those who are experiencing long haul symptoms, really that came about because the virus was encoded with information that then got into their cells and altered their DNA? So this type of research, essentially what it does is it gives scientists the ability to transmit whatever messages they want across cells. And one of the researchers on this project, she talked about how in the future, now again, this was in 2012, she's talking back then, she says in the future, this research could be used for tissue engineering and also for the creation of artificial organs. Well, that's already happening today. Now, another study, this was more than 20 years ago, and this was conducted by Russian scientists. And what they discovered is that words and frequencies can reprogram our DNA. Now, this is where epigenetics comes in, like I was talking about earlier. So simply stated for your audience, epigenetics is the impact our thoughts, behaviors, and lifestyle choices have on our body, soul, and spirit, as well as future generations. So what these Russian scientists did is they decided to examine the 90% of our DNA that Western scientists consider to be junk DNA. See, Western scientists, they only focus on the 10% of our DNA that's used in developing or building protein. So the Russian scientists, they thought outside of the box, and they were rewarded because their findings were groundbreaking. What they found is that the 90% of our DNA is actually involved in data storage and communication. In fact, the genetic code of that 90% of the DNA actually follows the same rules as human language. It uses syntax and grammar rules. So it appears that our human language is really just verbalizations of our DNA, which is fascinating.
Yeah, geez.
But even beyond that, what they did is they discovered how to use frequency and words to transmit information from one set of DNA to another. So practically speaking, they turned frog embryos into salamander embryos without a surgical procedure.
Whoa.
And this really is scientifically showing the power in our words. And this ties into, how epigenetics can change our DNA. So one of the things that I want to encourage us and maybe turn a corner to talk about some good news, because all of that can be kind of disturbing, but we can actually use epigenetics to help break us free from this mind control technology that's used with music and sound.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Wired for Impact. If you're interested in creating and expanding your impact, be sure to visit us online at impactnow.com.